Um, hello, hello everyone.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of In Convo With. This time I'm hosting Dani Derks, a person that I have seen in a YouTube video when I was researching Norns for the very
Mm,
first time. Like I don't know if you saw
mm.
the episode with Jonathan Snyder, but it said like
Yeah.
when I was like watching those little videos trying to figure out what the hell the machine does. I saw like one video that you had on coding and on I think it
Mm.
was on the first slide series or like the
Yeah.
study series, the first slide. And I just
Mm.
remember like looking at that and I said, wow, this sounds like the nicest person that ever existed. And I was just like, wow, damn. And then, I met you in Berlin and
Yeah.
everything rang true. So
Mm.
Danny, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Maybe
Thanks
just
for having me.
introduce yourself to the folks. Maybe.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Dani Derks. I live in rural New York, where I work with my friends Brian and Kelly, Brian Crabtree and Kelly Kane, on a project called Monome, as well as, I guess, a number of projects. So Monome is our synthesizer company, for lack of a better term, a small operation, just the three of us full time on the day to day. And then at the same time, we also collectively kind of facilitate an art and craft supply store and a community classroom space in the enclosing building around our synthesizer factory or workshop. Workshop's a better word for it. And yeah, through Luck Dragon, we facilitate classes on everything from music technology and open source and coding your own website and soldering small electronics. But also, we host a number of artists that live in the area where we are in Delhi, is in Delaware County in New York, and there's a high concentration of really talented artisans who also have yeah, a lot of congeniality. And so we host workshops from folks who will teach you how to sew your own clothes, how to mend, how to watercolor, how to build your own kalimba. Yeah, it's a really sweet thing.
Wow, that's
It's
so
put us in
like
touch.
uh
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of really intrigues me because you looking at the looking at the Instagram posts and like trying to figure out the history of Monome and like
Mm.
seeing that everything is kind of happening in the upstate New York part.
Yeah.
Uh I was kind of curious how the hell does such a small community have a
Mm.
such a gigantic part in the artistry, in the arts, in the whole art community. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
wondering, was this like naturally there, like people were
Mm.
just born at the beginning, or was it
Mm.
something like somebody moved there and then they call their friends, hey man, it's beautiful up here, let's move. How did all that happen in Delhi?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I won't try to speak too much for Brian and Kelly, but they came out here almost 20 years ago from Philly, Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, in the US. And I think that they were at a crossroads. It was just before the, what, 2003, 2005 crash. And so they were at a crossroads of figuring how to kind of align the way that they live and the way that they build community and the way that they establish home. How do they live that in line with the things that they believe about how other folks could be doing it with mindfulness and with awareness. I know that those are words that get kind of co-opted by capitalism, but really just coming down to like, yeah, how do you do something with intention, and how do you align those attentions? And so they were either going to remain rooted in cities, and they were living in a coffin factory, a
Oh,
decommissioned
jeez.
coffin
Okay.
factory in Philly, and just watching like all of this real estate being bought up. And like the warehouse that they were living in, massive space, was probably only like a few $1,000s, or not a few thousand, but a few $100,000, for like a huge space that is now worth a couple million.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, okay, do we participate in something that we are vehemently against spiritually, like not capital S spiritually, but like really just at our core, or is there a place that we can be where we have more opportunity to engage with the way that we feel like life should be and should be possible? And so they moved out to Delhi, which they had visited through their connection to an artist and a teacher who was established out here. And they lived in their van while they restored their house. They built the Monome workshop inside of the barn. And over the last 20 years, they've done an incredible job at maintaining that human scale. And so the relationships that they welcome into their lives are always very intentional. Not to overuse that word, but it is the one that comes most to mind when I think of them. And so there have been artists that have moved out here from different disciplines because they got introduced to the area through Brian and Kelly. And myself and my spouse, Rocky, we are part of that. And so there is like a natural
Progression, yeah.
entry point, through Monome and through Brian and Kelly in particular, because they're multifaceted artists. But also this area has a really rich history of attracting weirdos. Like I was just reminded the other day that Ram Dass and Timothy Leary had purchased a like small mansion for a few $1,000s in the I think late 60s or early 70s to conduct some of their acid tests. And so it's like, that's like an hour and a half away. And so I think like, our proximity to New York City, our proximity to Boston, our proximity to other states, it's really central. And the water is amazing, and the air is incredible, and the environment is really temperate. We do get, a good amount of snow, but there are seasons, and we're situated in a way that feels sustainable through the coming climate change crisis. And so I think that also...
So you feel a bit safer, like being there with this...
We're just having more resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, natural resources. We, even though we are in a drought watch, technically, like all of New York City's water comes from this region. And so there's a natural abundance of, like really crucial life-giving resources out here. Which I think was also part of people's mentality during the first wave of COVID. And so you have a bunch of artists that came out from New York City.
So what's your story then here? Like, how did you get, like, can you give me a bit of a background?
Yeah. I visited Brian and Kelly with my spouse, Rocky, 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. We drove out because we were in Boston for just to visit like some college friends. I went to school in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is like a mill town outside of Boston. And we were living in Chicago, and so being in Boston with a car was the closest that we were ever going to be to New York, even though it was like a 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive.
Yeah, it's
But
not that much, right? Yeah.
yeah. But I had just started the Sound and Process podcast, and had gotten an opportunity to connect with Brian directly through that. And this is also when Kelly was a little more active on the forum. And so I emailed Brian and I was like, hey, like, this may be weird, but I really would love to meet you and would love to see where this project takes place and to see what your life looks like. If you are willing to host me and at the time, my girlfriend, Rocky, would you be willing to host us for a night? We'll drive out, we'll drive back. Like, it'll be like 12 hours at most. We won't put you out. And Brian responded very quickly and very enthusiastically and invited me to like play and make a video in their barn. And they made us a fantastic dinner, and we had just like endless kind of conversations. Stayed up way too late, went to bed for a few hours, woke up. Brian woke up with us and patiently answered my questions about chord shapes, because his particular the way that his hands move on a traditional like piano keyboard is really inspiring and improvisational, but like always works. And so I was just like, how do you do that? And yeah, I think like just being able to hang out and being able to connect with these people who are, like incredibly generous, but at the same time, like very watchful of that. They extend generosity freely, but it really matters to receive that recognition of like, cool, you have given me a gift, and I so very much appreciate it.
I think that kind of reflects in the whole Lines community, is this like openness to conversation, new ideas, all the other stuff. And it's just like it's like a little marketplace of ideas just going back and forth. And you describing your visit with Brian, it just kind of reminded me, okay, yeah, much like that on a smaller scale, something that's kind of the idea that I get when you described Delhi. Delhi. That's
Delhi,
right.
yeah,
Delhi. Okay.
It is named after Delhi, but pronounced by colonizing white people.
Oh yeah, of course. Oh, it always goes back to that sport, right? Oh, geez. But anyway, I want to kind of put a bit of more focus onto you.
Sure. Yeah.
You stated that, okay, so you wrote an email to Brian. You guys met, and you were already doing the Sound Plus Process podcast at that time, right?
Yeah.
So let's go. I usually do this when I ask an artist on the show, like, okay, yeah, where did you start? We're doing kind of the backwards thing here, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Let's see, Sound and Process, right? So for those that don't know, Dani hosts a amazing podcast called Sound Plus Process, which I unshamefully took a lot of inspiration for this show. I hope you're not angry about it.
God, no.
But like, how did that happen? Like, what was the idea to create this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, it really grew out of I had so many questions and not enough in real life and in real time away from keyboard resources to answer those questions, because so many of them were based on very specific gestures that had come out of people programming things for grids and Arc. And I at the time owned neither of these objects. I had stumbled upon lines in all right, I had stumbled upon lines because I had like been around for the last like 10 days of the old monome.org forum,
Hmm.
which I had found through Rodrigo Constanzo's The Party Van, which is this incredible audio real-time sampling, mangling Max application that had a Monome grid compatibility layer. And I was like, oh, cool. What the heck is the box with the buttons? I had like a launch key or something like that. So I was like aware of the Novation stuff. And then I saw the Walnut 64 and I was like, oh my God, that's the most beautiful thing. Maybe I will be able to afford one used and like just set up like an eBay alert. And in the meantime, just this was also like the first time I was considering, this is 8 years ago, the first time I was considering what it would be like to use a computer to make music. And, at that time, I think I had like a got a cat here, spinning hard drive MacBook Pro from working at the Apple store that I had gotten on discount. And so I was like, all right, cool. Like, what's all the stuff I can run on this? And I very quickly got into a morass of a lot of open-ended environments like Max. This was the first time I encountered the idea of MIDI, which like when you have a physical object that's like, oh, this spits MIDI out, you connect with a MIDI cable, even though it's still a little like, oh, wow, that cable has so many messages going back and forth on so many channels. Because there's a physical element, it's a little bit easier to grok, but like in a just computer where it's like, a MIDI message and OSC and all of these DAWs. And like, I was just lost. And so I had stumbled upon Glia's Macarnus album. And so I was not only lost kind of conceptually, but I was lost like in, I don't know, like encapsulating like what all of these tools lead to. And Macarnus was like the first clear shot besides like the Monome videos. It was the first clear statement of like possibility and of a horizon that I really, really dreamed about. Like the combination of like using sampling and delays and like remixing in real time. And so I was just like, I don't know, my imagination was set on fire by Jonathan's work. And so I reached out to him. This is Jonathan Intook. He really graciously was like, yeah, I'll talk to you over the phone, stranger.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, just to kind of like legitimize it or whatever, I'll record it. And like, if you're open to it, if something cool comes out of it, I'll share it back with everyone. Cause I'm sure, this was at the time, maybe like 1,000 people at most.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, maybe some of these other people have similar questions. And this will be a good kind of like, I don't know, like a folk tale in a funny way. Just like I was
A modern
really,
folk tale, yeah.
yeah. And like really enamored with like the way that DIY punk scenes would do self-documentation through zines. And I was like, okay, what is, at this point, 2015? What would be the zine of 2015 for somebody who doesn't have like any graphic design skills? And I was like, yeah, maybe a podcast. And so we recorded that conversation. I edited it. Jonathan sent me a couple of unreleased tracks, and then shared it back out. And it was like a weird thing, but people were enthusiastic about it, and it was easy from there to queue up more conversations because all I had to do was follow my curiosity. And not only that, but like, yeah, when you're really set on fire about someone's work, you dig super deep and you spend a lot of time in a very short period of time. You probably also experience this where like you just tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And so it was, yeah, like a useful way to validate the hours that I had like spent and joyfully spent learning about all of these artists. And it was like such a freaking gift to be able to share my enthusiasm back with them. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the project.
So this was way before you actually were in the Monome sphere, right? So this is something that you have done before. So your interest in electronic music then precedes this point as well, probably, yeah? Like,
Ish. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. So what did you like? Did you play any like acoustic instruments? What was the before going into, oh, let me just code myself an audio mangler from scratch, like what was the predisposition to that?
Yeah, I mean, I played like bass in a shitty pop punk band in high school, and
Haven't we all? Yeah.
I know, right? Just a band of bassists. We've all played bass. But yeah,
I
no,
listened to that. No, not gonna lie.
but I was always the one who would record. So I had like a Tascam Porta Studio 4-track thing. And yeah, like I really liked going to Guitar Center and like Daddy's Junkie Music, which like doesn't exist anymore. But I liked going to these retail spaces, not just to like play with the basses, but to see what was on the other side of the store in the computer section, because it just seemed so weird to me. And like, yeah, again, that idea of like abstracting something into a digital format that has roots and has touchstones in analog and in physicality, but yeah, how much further you can go with any one idea. And so, yeah, like I was interested in recording, and then it wasn't until I went to college and there was like a grad school program that you could do for education, which we're really hurting for educators here in the States, and it's probably true in a lot of places. And so you could do it for free. And so me and like 4 friends all lived together, and one of the friends did not do the program, but was subbing in the school system. And so every morning he would make like ambient loop sort of like beat things. And this is 15 years ago on like a SP, I think it was an SP303.
Okay.
And
old school.
Yeah. Like, and then I think he also got an SP404, like while we were living together. And just like one day I was like, Mickey, how the hell are you doing this? And like, so he showed me, you had like a cassette player, he had a Walkman, and he would just like load up tapes and like just totally blind, just load up a tape, kind of fast forward through it, just play, record like 8 seconds, and then would just like chop it up and like resample and pitch effects and everything. And he built these really full, lush environments out of just what was available at the present moment. And I think that is the high watermark where I was like, oh, cool, you can do that. That's a way of working with media and working with, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's goofy, but it's like files, it's like that's a way to work with digital media in a way that is like really novel and extends well past what people think about when they think about working with electronics, or at least at that time for me. So yeah, this.
So did you like this let's say more experimental electronic music? Was this like was the experience that you had looking at this friend with an SP303, was this like the little switch that went, oh yeah, I can make that. Let me just move away from my five bassist band and just kind of go all fingers into mangling recordings, because like it was this like the moment of when you just went, I'm way more interested in expressing myself through this type of would you say?
I think that there are 2 points in that are fun to kind of like investigate. One of them is like, no, nothing ever quickly sets for
Yeah,
me.
okay. Yeah.
Everything is like a slow bake, or like I guess a chili pot.
Yeah.
And so everything, it's like the ingredients get added, but it might be years before I understand what to do with those parts. And like in the meantime, everything feels like discontinuity. I like even just like jumping from like teaching to doing improv comedy to doing working with Monome, like those things like as benchmarks feel like they
Yeah.
don't belong. But like being able to actually boil it down and see that like, oh, this kernel of like curiosity about where people are coming from and how, like, not only how but why people create has underpinned all of those things. And so like with music, like watching Mickey work put something in that I was like, okay, great. I'm gonna let that simmer. I'm gonna see what happens. And I didn't make any music. Like I like left college, moved to Pittsburgh, kind of made a little bit of music on like an iPad that I got for an education thing that I was doing. And it was an iPad 2, and like made a beat. And I was like, that's cool. I made a beat. I don't understand what an LFO is. Nothing actually says what those letters are.
Yeah.
So I don't know, whatever. It makes the wub wub sound. And so, it wasn't
This is how
until
usually I think of it, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's the whoop whoop machine.
Yeah. No, but like those touchstones are really important. And so like I moved to Chicago and like was doing improv comedy and then got burned out on that, and I was like, oh shit, I kind of miss making music. And just everyone I knew though was doing like 15 comedy shows a week, like sometimes starting at midnight. And so it's just like, all right,
So
like
was
no one
this
has
like
time.
you said improv comedy? Was this
Yeah.
also like stand up at times, or was this just like in a group, like an improv group, and then you just bounce ideas off of each other?
Yeah. I did a lot of long form improv at IO, which is Improv Olympic, which is kind of the like weird cousin of Second City. And so, I didn't do any sketch. I did a little bit of sketch acting, but I didn't do any stand up. They're really kind of discrete, separate worlds at that time. I don't know what
Yeah.
it's like now.
I mean, how old were you then at that point?
It was in my late 20s.
Okay. Do you
Yeah.
feel like because like as you're talking to me, I can see like a person that like has just like such a broad specter of interest and just like
Mm.
moving up and down. And I know that like some of these things are probably also cultural,
Mm.
in the USA when you have like different states and like people just move from one state to the other and all that.
Mm.
Not, like this is something that we don't experience much here in Europe. It's just like you're mostly on
Mm.
one place or in one country, even though we do have like with the European Union kind of options. But I guess like a
Yeah.
language barrier and everything like this makes American ways of doing that just a bit different. But what I wanted to
Yeah.
ask was like, have you felt like in a way you were searching yourself there? Like what's that thing that kind of pushed you towards that you ended up with Brian and Callie in Delhi, upstate New
Yeah.
York?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, but not to push things off course into like
Yeah?
darker territory, but like
Okay.
in my late 20s, I was severely depressed and was really struggling. and just I was pretty confident that I wouldn't make it to 30.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And when around the time, I don't know, I was like 28, and I was 28 when I decided that I definitely would not be killing myself. And
Okay.
so I was like, okay, cool. What do you do on the other side of that when you grew up pretty sure that like 28 was going to be it? And I was meandering a little bit and just kind of like seeking something to cut through. And the first thing that did was it was Rodrigo's videos, and then really specifically Brian and Kelly's performances. And so I think just like a little lighthouse kind of like shown in the distance in a way. And I was like, oh, cool.
You mentioned performances. Like, is it something that you went to see? Was it a video, or you went to an actual live event, right?
No, it was just video.
Okay.
Yeah. But they
And this was something. Okay.
Yeah.
So this was something that kind of, let's say, shone a light in a way of, like, I guess, expressing oneself through different means.
Well, so that is maybe the other thing out of the two.
Okay.
That I wanted to investigate, because like expressing myself is really tenuous for me. Like, it's really a dicey proposition. Because
okay, what does that mean? Sorry, I'm not.
No,
really,
you're so good.
Confident on the language barrier here. Yeah.
It's also like maybe a malapropism, but like it's the idea that I am charged with the responsibility of, it's like all in quotes, right? Responsibility of finding these, and crafting these gestures and these progressions and these moments and things like that. Like, it becomes such a fucking head trip.
I get it.
Yeah. And like coming from improv comedy, where the best thing you can do is not make the joke, it's to further what's happening.
It's moving things
partner.
along. Yeah. Okay,
yeah. No one has time for your fucking pit stop of a punchline, And so I had tuned this kind of muscle to be like, okay, cool. Like, how do you remove like, oh, I'm the genius from the process of building something and creating something? And it's like, it's kind of trite to be like, a conduit or a vessel or something like that. But like the middle ground between those things, I think, is really interesting and really fertile. Where you're tightening your game as an individual, as a creator, as a person who takes in content and art, and you tighten up all of those mechanisms and those faculties, and eventually you hit a point of frictionlessness with tools, and if you spend enough time. And so like that has always been my primary motivation for working with computers, is to try to get to that like organic, almost like a nature documentary or a nature documentarian, where they don't go out into the woods with cameras and be like, all right, Mother Nature, we're here. Give us your best scene.
Show us. Yeah.
And birds. But they wait and they watch for it. And there is skill. There's so much skill. And a lot of it is in the patience. And a lot of it is in being able to identify that, oh, this is the moment, actually. And that is something that Brian and Kelly's videos pointed toward the most for me, was people using these tools in that kind of lineage and that kind of direction. And I was like, oh, dope. This makes sense.
So
to me.
Just so I understand, it's basically just furthering the in a way progress, whatever you're doing. Because you mentioned coding, you mentioned improv, you mentioned music, and the thing when you mentioned improv was like, okay, it's the best thing to do is basically to jump off each other in
Yeah.
order to further the idea. So the
Yeah.
question here is like, do you feel that is just the ultimate philosophy when you're doing anything? Like
Hmm.
it's furthering, in a sense, a person. Well, it's not. I wouldn't say personal. I guess the spirit of progression in a way.
Yeah. I mean,
You know, like
it's, yeah.
like with music, you're basically using your tools just in order to progress your ideas through means that are in front of you. With with coding, I suppose it's
Hmm.
the same. It's kind of the same thing. It's just
Hmm.
you always start with a blank piece of text template, and then
Hmm.
you maybe put a boilerplate in, or you just start whatever. But you're
Sure.
basically progressing that certain idea into a further, in a way, future, I would say. But like, is that a part of your philosophy when you're thinking about that, like
Yeah.
moving onwards?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've always moved in pursuit of an experience more
Mm-hmm.
than an outcome. Um,
Okay.
and so like with with coding, like all of it was improvisational in a way. Um, I had a really specific way that I wanted to interact with
Mm-hmm.
audio and with other instruments or other musicians, which was this like real time sampling, pull the thing in and immediately remix it, and like doing a lot with very little
Mm-hmm.
is kind of the maybe the more like philosophy of it. But then yeah, like building tools and building possibilities, I guess, is really where it's at, so that I have these goofy little advententures. And I think this is true of like anyone who's scripting for Norns or working with Max or building things in Super Collider. We have the clear idea, and that's actually the hardest part. The hard thing is not the coding, and it is not the learning the language or learning the syntax or learning the idiosyncrasies of the environment. Those are, you know, the necessary steps to just move through and like get the thing to come alive. But it is so much harder to have an idea that compels you through all that. And
Yeah.
I think that like musicians, like this is why I think that the Norns project is dope. And I think that we're in a really beautiful golden age, like Max 9, like with everything that they've added in there,
Mm-hmm.
that cycling has added in for doing like these really small little scripting gestures and like infusing that into the visual patching paradigm. I think we are in a bit of a golden age of like ways to express the
Mm-hmm.
idea, but we are almost at a, I don't know, at a really cool inflection point where it's like actually the idea is worth more, especially when you look at large language models and AI being sold to all of us as some kind of yeah, whatever. We're not going to get into that, but
Oh,
like
please no.
the idea is the thing that is human, and the idea is the thing that is based on, you know, your growing up
Mm-hmm.
and your experiences when you were 8 are gonna affect the way that you, yeah, the way you treat people, the way you ask for things in relationships, sure, but it's also gonna affect the horizon of possibility that you
Yeah.
see when you think about art. And like we're always remixing those really early encounters with media and with form. And like I don't know. So I guess I am curious, like, to hear on your side, like, as somebody who's tracking cultural differences as well, like, in the time and the place that you grew up, what do you feel like is, I don't know, were those moments of like, the course is set a little bit. Like, was there a TV show or like an artist or a group or
I mean,
something that like,
the question here is, what exactly do you mean by the course is set? So that I feel certain in a way my life is going, or my little journey through this is upon, or like, are you asking that just to make sure?
kind of, I guess
Okay,
that is one way, but like
okay.
the other would also be like, yeah, like what set your curiosity on fire from being
Oh,
a kid and being like, whoa, you can do that?
oh man, that's a good question, because my I guess my childhood was like so non-musical or non-expressive in a way. But
Hmm.
I guess the thing is, it's just like, damn it. Let me try to think. What was that thing that kind of happened? Because like my background is fairly, I would say, boring in a way. Because like I didn't go to any music school. I didn't even like music to begin with. But little,
Yeah.
you started at 14 because your dad just brought you a guitar for no reason, and then you just start, doing that, and you're like, oh wow, you can create. And I never went
Yeah.
into, because when you get a guitar as a teenager, the first thing that most would do was just like, which I think it's correct, is just trying to learn through other songs. I never did that because I was only more or less just interested. Oh yeah, how can I create that? How can I do that? In what
Yeah.
way I can do that? And then it just kind of went on from that. But I guess my main thing is that I was always interested in creative. I would say in creating a narrative or a story or something that would grasp. As a kid, I loved listening to stories. I loved watching, TV that would incorporate stories. May that be in
Mm.
cartoon form, or may that be in whatever. But it's always
Yeah.
like that. I like to imagine, different scenarios and how they play out and stuff like that. But there's always a difference when trying to express oneself. What are you trying to express? And a lot of people will
Mm.
go into hardcore impressions of a feeling, abstract stuff.
Mm.
I usually go, oh, there's a scene, and in this scene is that, is,
Mm.
like a couple of things, and then my curiosity kind of goes into, wait, yeah, but what does this mean? And then you start picking at details, and all these details
Yeah.
open up into other stuff, and you just start thinking about, how this story, which is just taken from a scene, progresses on. And this is something that I
Mm.
try to capture in music form as well. Like, one thing that a lot of people maybe don't know about me, but like, I love photography.
Mm.
I was I started doing it like years ago, so it's not, a long time, but like I started,
Mm.
just taking photos and trying to capture scenes, not
Mm.
really something that, that was see, but like I wanted a meaning in something, just because like when you take a photo, there's like, it's almost like still life. I mean, it is still
Yeah.
life, right?
Yeah.
It is something in front of you, and
Yeah.
you maybe you don't know that stranger which is in the photograph. Maybe you don't know what happened or whatever, but you can, your mind starts to wonder, oh yeah, maybe he or
Yeah.
she or they are, doing that, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh so I guess with music, and especially ambient music and this electronic thing that we do,
Yeah.
um I guess for me, what really sparks that creativity is that stillness that we create. So we're basically
Mm.
creating a scene, and
Mm.
we're opening up the doors for people to come in,
Mm.
to spend a moment there, and
Mm.
then at the same time make them create a narrative, make them the storytellers. you know, because art is obviously subjective. Art is open to interpretation. That's the best thing that art has to offer. It's basically giving the viewer or the listener the option of experiencing in their own way. So this is something that like really brings me to that. This is why I like to talk to people like you, or people that seem to understand this way of expressing oneself, that isn't really, you know, oh, let me just create a pop song and call it a day, but it's just like that little underlying thing that at times almost seems like magic, you know, like in that way. So
Yeah. And, you know, to be
yeah.
fair to pop music, like to do that in a 3.5 minute catchy container
Yeah.
is, it's like fucking high art. But yeah,
Yeah.
it needs that story piece and that invitation in.
Of course.
Yeah.
I was so a year ago I was lecturing music theory, and I was lecturing like people that were more or less into audio engineering. So there was like this campus or institute that basically had you know, had like programs to teach kids and young adults about music production. So my way there was basically to teach them a bit about chords, a bit about keys, a bit about, you know, like stuff that most of them, you know, as very aspiring trap producers don't really find it that interesting, obviously. But like the main thing, we had this little lecture that was designed to facilitate the idea of how structure works in a song. And I just said to them, hey, even if you don't, you know, listen to pop music or rock music, or, you know, something that would concise to a traditional song structure or something like that.
Yeah.
Bring me the ones that you have guilty pleasures of or really like, and let's just analyze the heck out of them. And you know what the idea there was, basically to sell them on the idea of a good song from a songwriting perspective is basically trying to tell a story through the, you know, uses of narration in verses, with the hooky choruses, with the way how the bridge comes in, when the way how it leaves the person like in this dynamic roller coaster ride, right? So and that's like that's like, I think, the key, because like people are naturally drawn towards stories. They're drawn towards a narrative, in a way, something that they can see, oh, it has a beginning and end. But what's interesting is this is still my proposition, like structure is key when it comes to song. But weirdly enough, when you look at the stuff that I do in ambient music, where a lot of people do in more formless music, let's say, for a lack of a better term, it's taking all of that ideas, like from typical songs and stuff like that, and just throws it out the window. But the key difference is here that the story is still there, the narration is still there, the way how we interpret the beginning and end, and what the meaning is, and everything is still there. The only difference is I'm not holding you by the hand through it. You're a person that's there, and you need to make it up on your own. And I think that in a way it's a gigantic little gift to anyone that's listening. It's just like, oh, okay, we're opening up, we're here, let's see what we can create.
No, I think that it's an empathetic offer to, like, and I would even like say that formless, you know, quote unquote music, or music with like meta structures rather than these like minute to minute things, what it does is it invites this like bring your own ending. Like when I think about like improvisation and like long form improvisation, where it's like, oh, okay, cool, like how do even just two people create something that lasts 45 minutes out of
Yeah.
nothing. And it's
Yeah.
the most important tool in our toolkit is our personal history and like all of the things that are coded inside of us. And if you can, as an artist, simply set up like, you have clearly gone through and listened and like felt in response to the instrumentation or the melodic movement or whatever it is. You have gone through and you've kind of vetted it where it's like, no, this inspires something. This taps
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
something for me. And I'm not going to present it to you with and this is what it is. I'm going to present you with the opportunity to join me in that reflection. And, best case scenario, what you end up with is a bunch of people who have individual experiences collectively where
Yeah, that's such a, because I was thinking when you were saying that, so like, you mentioned something beforehand regarding, from either from my childhood or, something that, sticks with you. Because the thing is, like, stuff from childhood will stick with you on a psychological level and on the creative level, obviously. Yeah. Like stuff that you listen to, stuff that gave you maybe comfort and brings you. This is why nostalgia is such like a gigantically important thing for everyone. It's just like, oh yeah, I want to go back to Simpler Rhymes or whatever, even though it might be even worse at that point. But the thing is, like, when we're talking about creativity and when we try to create something, let's say sound wise and everything like that, I usually think of it as, okay, I'm trying to invoke a texture that's simultaneously a feeling that more or less I'm 99% came from the back of my subconscious that I was influenced maybe when I was 4 or whatever, and I'm trying to create that. And you perform, you do your improvisational stuff, you have your machines, them by heart, you just start and you let it flow, you let those deeper feelings and deeper I don't know, that X factor that you have, just like throw it in. And the thing is, even though the people that are sat across from you and are listening to the performance, they do not know your history. They do not know your feelings that, are obviously portrayed through that, but they know something that may resonate with whatever texture you have given them. Like they might hear something that might remind them, and it's almost like we're worming our ways into another person and trying to bring in a way we're like shit psychiatrists just trying to get their deeper inner self outside and everything and let them resonate. And I think in that way that is what it truly is unique within art, not just sound, music, whatever, but like in visual and whatever. It's just like, hey, here's my feeling on this. Here it is, and take it, see what happens. Maybe you're gonna, maybe you're gonna enjoy it, or maybe you're gonna feel it in the same way or in a different way. It just really depends. But that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm rambled on quite a bit.
You didn't.
So
That was so connected. Yeah. I think like that is the, I don't know. That's kind of the beautiful proposal of performing live, and like not just having a studio practice, but seeing, like getting that real time feedback. And it's not always obvious. A lot of times it's subtle. But if I feel like as we age, we like have a better sense of somatic cues and like the way that the temperature changes in the room, and like you can kind of feel when something is hitting for somebody. And I yeah, it's funny to be like the the psychiatrist analogy, but like I think that the best we can do is like closer to uh yeah, like the way that like smaller communities would have people that were, like healer in quote, but like indigenous communities, like that is absolutely
Mm-hmm.
a true and felt thing. And like it is funny to like within the framing of capitalism, and especially like late stage capitalism, to still have these art forms. They look very different than they used to, but to still have these art forms that require empathetic practitioners, like the way that you just described, somebody who's
Mm-hmm.
thinking about everything you just described. Because yes, you are gathering 10, 20, hundreds of people in a space or a room or an apartment, and they are giving you the only resource that we have that is finite, which is time and that presence. And like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
what you do with it is so important. And not important like about you, but it is important
Yeah.
universally. And so yeah, to be conscious of that and to be considerate
What
of
do you
that.
think? What do you think is a good performance?
Hmm.
How would you describe a good performance?
That's a good question. um I think one that is, yes, practiced. Like I don't like, yeah, like a magic trick, a really
Okay.
good close up like card trick or like close up magic is the epitome of great performance, right? Because it is
Yeah.
uh it requires so much skill and it requires so much practice, but none of that effort and toil is legible
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like, oh man, they're really working. It's actually the opposite, right? It is
Yeah.
the magician needs to show only what is happening now, and it needs to look effortless. And when when people can achieve a complexity of organizing time and sound and movement and things like that, when they can present a complexity that feels effortless, then I think what that does is that pushes people, closer to not capital D, but divine. That
Yeah.
pushes
Yeah.
people toward that divinity, that thing that
Mm-hmm.
we know what we're talking about when we talk about inspiration. And we have such a clear sense of what it is. But as soon as we try to put words to it, it's like it all falls apart and it like becomes
Yeah.
isms and shit like that. But yeah, anything that can be presented without the look at me do this hard thing, and that allows for people to connect to that source of inspiration and curiosity and like awe. That I think
So
is a good performance.
when you go on stage, let's say, okay, like on stage, but like when you perform in front of the people, that
Yeah.
that second before you start,
Mm-hmm.
and you maybe you think to yourself, I'm gonna give it my all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a good performance.
Mm.
How do you feel when you start performing that you feel, okay, this is going good,
Mm.
or this is not going the way how I want it? Because like with
Mm.
experimental audio music or experimental sound art,
Yeah.
it's kind of like there, it's lingering, because like 99% of the time the audience doesn't know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
Like it's there, but um
Mm-hmm.
and you know that even if you make a little mistake here and there and stuff like that, or maybe the machine isn't working as it's supposed to, but you're still getting the amount of audio out so that people enjoy. But like, is there like a little thing that when you perform that you feel, yeah, I'm doing a good performance, I'm having a good performance? How do you like, what's that element that kind of gives you a push into thinking in this direction?
Yeah. I mean, it is the absence or presence of my sense of I. Like,
Mm-hmm.
who even is that? And when I can answer that question, when I say, like, oh, I know who I is, I's the one who's fucking struggling right now. Like, that is usually the case. I become aware of myself because a discontinuity has occurred, or because I have lost the pocket. I have
Mm-hmm.
lost the flow. I have lost the groove, whatever it is. And like, then you're just aware of yourself. And that to me is, if I don't think, then I know that it went well. Because as soon as I think, I try to problem solve, I assume the role of expert, and I become something separate from the beautiful thing that we were
Yeah.
just talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the right way to say here is basically, if you're in a trance, if you let yourself go and just enjoy the performance that
Mm-hmm.
you're creating, is,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the main thing here when you start, yeah, because you mentioned, oh yeah, I don't want to invite the expert out, and the expert is you because you're the only one that knows what you're doing
Yeah.
at that moment.
Yeah.
Um, I remember when we were in Berlin, there was like this. I can't remember the place where we play, where you guys played, and you had like a sound plus process live
Oh,
show.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can't remember the name, but
Base.
Seabase, yeah, okay. So if anyone's in Berlin, go say hi there, yeah. Okay,
Oh my
but
God.
yeah, but the thing is, I remember looking at Zach,
Mm.
and I remember because so Zach is Infinite Digits for those not in the known, but I remember looking and then talking to people after the show, and everybody was just like, yeah, I really enjoy how he took the grid and he
Mhm.
what's the word, angled it in a way so
Yeah.
all the lights were coming, and he seemed like he was really pushing on those buttons and stuff like that. So there was like this element that's a bit different than your typical ambient performance when a
Yeah.
person just sits down and then moves a couple moves buttons and does stuff. But there's like this
Yeah.
physical element, and this is something that I try to, in a weird way, try to incorporate in my own performances. It's just like this movement of body
Hmm.
with an equipment that's just meant to sit there. So do you feel
Mm.
like the physical element of a
Mhm.
performance with this kind of music is an
Mhm.
important one or not? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it is, depending on audience, it
Mm-hmm.
is crucial sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
People really, like, nobody guesses what the guitarist is doing.
Yeah.
Even if the guitarist is kind of autopiloting, like the meme about, or not meme, but like the joke about, like, oh, checking your emails, one of Tricks Point Never. And
Yeah.
it's just like, well, no, just you can't imagine, because you don't see cause and effect, because they're not also projecting their computer screen. And like, but somebody who's playing the same riff that they've always played, like, it's not any more like present necessarily all the time. But there's a non-negotiable physicality to it that
Mm-hmm.
allows somebody to be like, cool, they're doing the thing. This is happening because they're here.
Yeah.
And like, so for me, I've that's why I develop tools that don't have like a shit ton of automation, or at the very least, the automation is there to service what can change in a
Mm-hmm.
moment. And so like I'm thinking like, oh, okay, setting up a cheat codes buffer, pointing all three voices to that one buffer, setting arpeggios and doing different pitched and direction. And it's like, okay, cool. What goes into it is the thing that changes. And so like, cool, the automation is there, but it's not playing back like just a sound file. And I really love those. Yeah, the thinning of the veil between cause and effect
Okay. Yeah.
when
Yeah.
working with electronics. Yeah,
You
and this
had
like,
like
yeah,
you had. I remember you had like this performance. I think it's on YouTube, but I can remember the event. I know Jonathan played there as well, but you had like this performance with it was a drum pad
yeah,
that was then connected to Norns, I believe, or to Max, or you did
yeah.
some crazy stuff with a drum pad. But like, anyways, what I wanted to ask is, so I also remember when we were in Berlin and we were eating those delicious burgers that you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that. Oh yeah, I just love the drums.
Mm.
I would love to play drums. Is that like? Do you feel like you progressing into this way, oh, let's just use a drum pad, a drumstick, and stuff like that,
Mm.
that it's just adding this physicality to the way how we express, doing this kind of music?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean like I'm also trying on these gestures and just
Mm-hmm.
seeing like what does the physicality of a drumstick's head bouncing on a pad, like what does that offer me
Mm-hmm.
that I would never think to program in in a sterile kind of like text document.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there is a lot of joy to be discovered in infusing physicality and like really making it central. So not just like learning how to play drums so that I can like do a cool beat to my arpeggio.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning the options and the physicalities and the like interaction and making that the sole thing that drives a sequence. So like that video was, we did that at Portland State University as part of
Mm-hmm.
Habitus in
Yeah,
Portland.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and what all I was doing was like it was like a Keith McMillan bop pad, so it's 4 quadrants, and each quadrant was just advancing a sequence
Mm-hmm.
that was pre-programmed, but it's like that
Uh-huh.
same thing. That like what is automated and
Yeah.
what can be in the moment and happen right now. And so like yeah. I didn't like program anything there. All I did though was like navigate it. And it's just like, cool, nothing happens if I don't move. And I
Mm-hmm.
liked that proposition at that time because I was used to the idea of like a sequencer steps through and there's a clock and there's something that's automated and you can like
Mm-hmm.
jumble the clock to get human results. And I was just like, oh, well, I want to have a better sense of rhythm and interplay. Was really inspired by Milford Graves, the documentary Full Mantis
Mm-hmm.
that came out, I think, just before he died or right when he died. But I saw it after his death. And the the thing that he talks about is because everyone like credits him with this like really incredible polymeter and polyrhythm, and
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I'm not doing the math about it. Like I'm not thinking about like, oh, okay, this my right hand's in 7, and he's thinking about a time scale that is so minute, and
Mm-hmm.
he's only articulating like 10%
Yeah.
of what he is feeling and what is in the natural flow of
Yeah.
like his
Yeah.
heartbeat. And like that was really compelling to me, that idea of being able to check in with yourself somatically being able to use a physical process of just like being like, all right, do I want this to be fast? Like, and not just being like, let me change the setting, but actively being like, let me slow my thinking and my feeling and my heartbeat. Let me create ease. Because if I'm not experiencing that ease, there's no invitation for everyone else to experience it.
Yeah.
So,
So it's basically transferring the energy from yourself to an audience member in a
yeah.
way. It's just like that
Yeah.
energy that kind of moves, because like when I'm playing with a band that we have, it's always this like question, oh, again, what is a good performance? Well, basically just have fun, because
Yeah.
looking at us or at the performer, and then how this will affect back, I think really adds to the whole thing. I don't know. Uh, Hopefully at your end, the video didn't freeze, because at my end it did. Do you maybe?
Am I frozen?
Yeah, you're frozen. Okay,
I still
let
got
me
mine.
try to do something. I remember this, like the drum thing that you did.
Yeah.
Is this a script that you basically teased us with some time ago on the last release that you did?
Yeah. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been messing
What
around with.
happened?
Oh no, I mean it's still unfolding. Like I think I'm getting
Awesome.
my bearings. And so
Awesome.
like uh the yeah, the origins, let me do a really quick kind of like, all right, let me check my GitHub.
Yeah,
The
sure.
origins of that script were first committed 3 years ago.
Holy. Yeah. Okay.
And that is, it's like what I said earlier, that idea of like, yeah, just put it in the pressure cooker and just see what happens. Or not even the pressure cooker, actually.
Hmm.
No, it's the pot. It's the pot, like the cast iron or the enamel pot, and
You
like,
just like to keep it boiling until it's
yeah,
perfect
yeah.
ingredient. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, that was a version of it. And I'm still cruising through and still breaking it apart and like putting it in other things. And there was something you mentioned though that I want to highlight.
Hmm.
The idea of play and having fun. I remember this
Yeah.
from when I would direct theater performances in college. But
Hmm.
my mentor always would advise us to remember that they call it a play for a reason.
Hmm.
And, it's like, yeah, you're playing music. Like it shouldn't feel like you're
Hmm.
working. It shouldn't feel like you're struggling. Like that's what practice is for. That's what experimentation is for. But like, yeah, when you get to playing, like it should be fun.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Uh,
Anyway.
sorry about this, but it's just like I'm trying to figure out what's the main problem here, because technical difficulties.
Oh, you're
I'm
good.
just yeah. I'm just hopefully okay. So I'm just gonna record myself and just leave it, and just gonna look at you through because OBS is not good.
Oh, here,
But
wait.
I
I can
wanna.
probably turn my camera off and flip it back on. I think the recording will still, yeah, that'll still be active.
No, because I see
Nothing.
that we also don't get any audio from Discord. Again, yeah.
Okay.
So just hopefully everything is fine on in my
It'll be
Logic
fine.
template.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just wanted to maybe ask you one last thing. Is
Mm.
basically you mentioned coding. Obviously, a lot of people know you from cheat codes,
Mm.
which is probably the deepest script I have ever witnessed on Norse, and I think a lot of people also share the same thoughts.
Mm.
So I'll ask you this: how did you start with, not with cheat codes per se, but like the whole world of coding when it came to creating your own instruments?
Yeah. I guess teletype would be the primary thing. Like I had fucked around with Max a little bit, and yeah, I think like just didn't have I don't know, the right combination of prerequisites in order to really take off with that environment at first. But it was really Teletype and the writing of Laurie Spiegel in particular, who Brian pointed to as like this like high watermark of somebody's an artist who thinks through musical problems in code and who has facility on both sides. And yeah, so I had, just had like a bunch of experiments in Teletype that were really fun and compelling to me. And when the bitwise operators got added, there was the really basic cellular automata. I never actually know how to pronounce that. But like the one-dimensional CA, like that algorithm was really compelling to me because it you just like let it cruise through. It's the nature documentary metaphor that I had earlier. It's just like, cool, I don't know. I have, what is it? 256,000 options, depending on which bit I'm listening to and which rule I put in and which seed I use. And so I was like, all right, cool. I can sit here and like listen.
Do something, yeah.
Yeah. And like not have to think about it. Removed the I'm gonna write the best fucking melody kind of like thing that like if you're I don't know, like I'm probably not, but what I can do is like approach things as a listener. And anyway, so that's, I wanted a tool that did just that, and I wanted it inside of a computer because I had a very, very small Eurorack setup, and I had I think a cracked copy at that point, a cracked copy of Ableton Live. And I was like, well, I've got all these plugins. I really wanted to like Madrona Labs's Alto synth. I really wanted to control that. And so, I was like, all right, let me make a Max version of this one-dimensional thing. And like the Max patch it's funny because it's very literal in a lot of ways. Like I didn't open up the source code and like I couldn't translate that shit. I like was looking at C and I was like, I don't get it. I know Teletype language. I know this weird version of Forth. And so I went through all the Max tutorials that I could. And I just had like, basically I was like, all right, let's see if it works. And I would load up a seed and a rule on Teletype and I would step through it one step at a time. And then I would load the same one in my Max version. I'd step through it one step at a time. And when it derivated, I was like, okay, maybe I'll like solve for that one derivation. And so I just like did this whole fucking like nested thing because I wanted just to shape the results. And I learned a lot through that and like ended up working at Cycling because I felt really compelled by that process of being able to do that visually and being able to do it at a really atomic level. And I mean, fast forward, it's funny to talk about the scope of cheat codes as, because it's this massive fever dream. I had like the very first version of it was 2 buttons and like maybe something on the screen, but I was just using that to shortcut to soft cut buffer manipulations. And so like just that one idea of like being like, all right, cool, I've got 3 voices, I've got a rolling buffer. That was the other thing that Mickey turned me on to was, oh my God, I have to look it up because I need to credit her. Oh my God, Katya. We'll edit this shit out. Yeah. So this one thing that Mickey turned me on to years later
Yeah.
was called Slice Jockey, which is a pure data patch
Yeah.
that has I think two buffers, and then a bunch of like little blocks to represent like timing offsets
Mm-hmm.
and pitch offsets and things like that. And so it's just like pulling from the buffers, and it's circular buffers, always recording, and then doing this like real time chopping.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted a version of that in Norns, and so yeah, I just like use Softcut to like do this really basic, like, all right, key 2 randomizes 3 playheads in a
Mm-hmm.
in a buffer, and K3 probably turns recording on and off, or like clears the
Yeah.
recording. And that was enough for me. I made an album with that. Like, that was Phylum. And it was funny that the bloat of cheat codes was somewhat like driven by like what I wanted, but it was more what I wanted to provide for
What?
others,
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and like people's feedback and people's requests, and like anytime somebody connected with the core idea and had an idea to extend it, it felt like doing improv. It felt like, yeah, you put this little offering up, and a good scene partner will be like, yeah, I fucking get that, and here's 10 other things,
Oh my
or
God.
just one other thing, Yeah, what?
I love how you basically circled it around to improv. I mean, it's it's like it's a little key and it just kind of comes back amazing. Thank you. Okay, I think best to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Danny, I'm just gonna say, if people wanna get in touch with you, if people
Mhm.
wanna ask you something, or where can they find you? How can they get in touch?
I'm on Lines. I would love more people to join the conversation there. Um, yeah, I think it's a space that is really special, and has grown and changed a lot since I started the Sound and Process podcast. And I think that, yeah, I don't know, some new energy and some new direction could be useful for that space. And yeah, I want more people sharing the ideas that they have, not just the workflows that they've landed on and like gear takedowns or boosts. Like, those are cool, those are useful. But what to me characterized the Lion Storm, the reason why I wanted to know more about everyone that was there when it was like under 1,000 people, was how many unique ideas were getting shared constantly, just seeds, just kernels.
Mm-hmm.
And people would talk about that, and people would, yeah, hype each other up to explore these outer edges. And like, I would love to see more of that. And so, yeah, if people have things that they want to ask me or share, I would encourage them to do it online.
So for those that still haven't taken the plunge, even if you don't know a Norns or a Monome, Lines is an open community for all creative, all wonderful. So like you say on Sound and Process, join the community, get on Lines, and share your ideas. Be part of that. Danny, thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
It's been great. This is exactly why I wanted to create this little series. Is basically, I think maybe you can share the same thought here. Is basically getting to know other people that share so much passion for anything creative, to be honest, anything in that sense. So thanks again, Danny. It's been
thank
wonderful.
you. Yeah, thank you for this whole series. I love that you have taken this on, and like, yeah, it is such a necessary point of reflection back to people, so that they see that, yeah, it's like we all found ourselves in this weird little corner of the internet because we have a lot of shit in common.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really appreciate things like this project that highlight that and give opportunity to, yeah, to just humanize.
Thank you so much. And thank you
Thank
all
you.
for joining us. Cheers.